Hello, yes, this is me, Elliot Stewart, with Gaz Johnson. Hello, Gaz.
Hey, Al, good to see you as always.
Well, and very much to see you as well, because we are going to be doing Doctor Who review today. But a classic, or is it a classic? The series 24 from 1987, with the debut of Sylvester McCoy as the Seventh Doctor. And we meet Mel again, who was in the previous season, played by Bonnie Langford, who recently returned in Doctor Who in 2023. But here we are in 1987. It's, I think, about September time. I'm not sure. And it's time for Time and the Rani. Well, brace yourself. Well, Gaz, what did you think?
Time and the Rani, the Doctor Who story that stopped me watching Doctor Who when it was first broadcast. That's my first confession to start with. Yeah, I think that for me it was the double whammy of I loved Colin as the Doctor, and so Sylvester coming in, who I knew best from Jigsaw, I think is fair to say, wasn't a popular choice for me.
And you're frozen, and the omen has struck. Gaz is standing still, not saying anything. So I don't know whether that's the wretched Rani, or I don't know. You've frozen. He's been put in some sort of time eddy, or Eddie should be able to help. So it was just.
Not really a fan of Sylvester McCoy coming in. I'd loved Colin as the Doctor. Really enjoyed him. Really enjoyed the interpretation. Was a bit miffed he'd gone away. Never was particularly a fan of Bonnie Langford, and so it was a double whammy for me. That teenage Gaz just looked at this and went, "Oh no." I did come back and watch some of the later bits of the season, but this is probably of all the seasons of Doctor Who, when it was first broadcast while I was alive, I watched the least on first broadcast. Now that said, I watched it again last year, and it was a bit of a revelation. Not of the Daleks, obviously.
No.
It wasn't as bad as I kind of feared. Maybe because I've matured, maybe because I was able to watch it as a sort of camp panto, and maybe because I've certainly enjoyed Sylvester far more over the years. I've come to quite enjoy him as the Doctor. So I think as a return visit, really quite enjoyable. First time out, this had got like 2 or 3 from me if I was scoring it. But let's talk about it a bit more. What about yourself, Elliot? What's your thoughts?
Well, I was slightly grabbed by the tech traps, which sounds really painful. But I did really like them. They had 3 eyes, but they always seem, even though they have 360 vision, they keep turning to look at things. You don't need to do that. You've got 100 eyes. And I can remember there being clues at the beginning of the serial, how or where this was going. It was going to be a little bit more over the top. As the TARDIS arrives, there's a rainbow effect, which they've never had before, and it's very, very.
Yeah. I quite like that materialization effect of sort of zoom, end of the rainbow.
And I remember sort of thinking when the Rani walked in and went, "Leave the girl. It's the man
I want." Yes.
Oh, we're going there, are we? Very, very. What's Diva-ish and OTT, which I like.
Panto, as I say, it's panto. It's fine, Well,
there's like a line. Also, there's something strange about the script. Apparently, Pip and Jane Baker apparently wrote it for Colin Baker, and there's a couple of lines which don't relate to not necessarily the character, but the location. There's a point where Bonnie Langford and Sylvester McCoy meet up for the first time, and she doesn't believe that he is the Doctor. And the line she says is, "What, under the carpet?" But they're not standing on a carpet. Now, remember, the phrase "under the carpet" is something that people said in the 20th century if they were computer programmers.
I was going to say I was always talking about carpets all the time, certainly in the 20th century. Yeah.
Constantly. Man,
I mean,
other than that, so when Sylvester. I was going to say, when Sylvester McCoy showed up as the Doctor, I, like yourself, was used to seeing him being a little bit silly, being the Omen in Eureka, and possibly seeing that picture of him in the Radio Times, this goofy guy with the glasses, nothing wrong with that. And it was a sort of a situation of going, okay, the Doctor has been silly in the past, Tom Baker and Patrick Troughton and everything, but it seemed to be, as you said, we were both teenagers.
Yeah.
This is not what we wanted from Doctor Who, but I did enjoy it. I don't quite know why. I think it was something about the confidence in its ridiculous, or I don't want to say rubbishiness, but I don't know quite why I like it now. I couldn't quite understand why I liked it then. But it's not.
The casting of Sylvester, to me, you kind of got that feeling at the time that why not cast Timmy Mallet if you want a shorter guy with silly glasses and just go all the way and say this is a kids show. And I know Doctor Who, whackaday, there we go, yeah, lovely. And though Doctor Who is ostensibly for younger audiences or a family show, this to me at the time felt like, oh my lord, I'm mid-teens. This is now suddenly aiming down. It's aiming well down the age range, a bit like the first season of Jodie's Doctor, I have to say, as well. It suddenly felt that, oh, have I matured out of the programme 30, 40 years later? I felt like that for the first time with Time in the Rani.
Well, the thing is, the script's written by Pip and Jane Baker, and they can actually make quite a good rollicking little romp. There's cliffhangers, there's monsters, there's an arch villain, there's a new Doctor trying to find his way. You can feel like there's some really good elements here. But as you say, everything is ramped up to 11, not in a scary way, but in a goofy, childlike way. Now, that can be good, but at that point in the 80s, Doctor Who has been said to be too violent. It was taken off the air in 1985. Too violent. My goodness, season 22 was quite violent. And by the time they get 2 seasons later, it's like, oh, it's too goofy. You can't win with these people. Like JNT was probably saying. It's too.
When you think about the Lacatrians going off with that exploding bubble, it's violent but funny. Whereas with Colin Baker's era, that would have been just dark. There's a trap that puts you in a bubble that flows you away and explodes,
and leaves a rather sad skeleton. And also that's Benedict Cumberbatch's mum in all that makeup.
Is it really?
That's her. She cried, and apparently a young Benedict Cumberbatch got to be on the set, so he wandered around in a gravel quarry. Now I think the quarry looks great. I was just watching Time in the Rani recently, and I must say I wasn't bored. There's just set piece after set piece. The only thing I will notice is that it's a bit what's the word? It is like a comic strip, a Doctor Who comic strip brought to life. It's also got this sort of meandering plot. Like it's fun to watch, but it isn't really. There's not a ticking clock, and there should be. As in, I love the idea that Rani is using the Doctor, dressing up as Bonnie Langford, and we've all done that.
That was one of my favourite bits of it, actually. I have to say, the whole sort of, the Rani pretending to be male and taking advantage of the Doctor in his post-regeneration confusion. I quite like that plot. The two of them wearing the same outfit, which looked very different on the two actors.
Also, I like the fact that Tetraps, the lead Tetrap, I don't know what his name is, Ulrich, or what? He's got a weird alien name, but he has an arc. You watch him, they give him something to do. He's not just like a lumbering whatever. He gets his revenge at the Rani at the end. So as much as hackneyed and as cheesy as this story is, all the things connect. The people, there's no, I wouldn't say filler, but I do say it to have that idea that the Rani wants to invent this time manipulator. Have that from the beginning. Then we have to stop her because she'll do something. But to suddenly at the end, in what appears to be a PowerPoint presentation explaining what she's going to do to our heroes, I think it's got some really good ideas. It's certainly not Doctor Who at its finest, but I don't think it's the worst.
It's not season 26, that's for sure.
Oh, well, that's the thing.
It's controversial, I know, but let's talk about the regeneration, though. I mean, it's not a good regeneration, is it? Let's face it.
I mean, it's a tricky thing to do because obviously the actor had been given his cards, is it, and told to go away.
Yeah.
And I remember sort of reading that apparently Colin Baker had said he'd come back if he could regenerate at the end of Time in the Rani. That would have been interesting. It would have been different. I mean, last time they tried to do something different with the Doctor, it was Twin Dilemma. So maybe that's not such a good idea.
Do you know, Twin Dilemma is another of those stories I have not been able to bring myself to watch since broadcast.
Or brace yourself. Go
I know. I feel I really need to because I want to watch Caves of Androzani again soon, and
don't watch it in that order.
No, I know.
And then that's what he did. No. So the regeneration, or basically somebody faces away from the camera, turns round and a wig falls off.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I suppose they couldn't use Colin's likeness. I feel that they should have done something a bit more novel. I'm not sure whether.
I actually feel they should. I
Whether he
feel they
could
should
have
have
walked
used a.
in.
They should. I think they should have just used a different actor who had a better body frame, because it's very clear that someone with Sylvester McCoy's body frame and a ginger curly wig is regenerating into a wigless Sylvester McCoy. So there's not a sense of the whole body changing in quite the same way. You could have just done with, as you say, a stunt double, roll over, face has changed, Sylvester. You know, it would have looked better, I think.
And also, he doesn't sacrifice himself to regenerate. He essentially falls off an exercise bike.
Yeah. On the other hand, is it better than Sylvester's regeneration into McGann with the amazing gurney? I mean, there's an argument that maybe that's the worst one. Oh, so timing malfunction. Sorry, we're not doing the 96 movie, are we? But
yeah. That was very good. You auditioned very well.
We probably should at some point.
Yeah. So with Time and the Rani, and here it is. I mean, it is a very guilty pleasure, but it doesn't mean I don't get any pleasure from it.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
So, without giving it a mark out of 10 for goofiness and silliness and enjoyment, should we be giving it a real review or our enjoyment review? What should we do?
I think you've just got to give it the review on the basis of, you know, I know how I felt when I rewatched it last year, and I enjoyed it far more than I thought I was going to. I mean, it's only a 5 out of 10 for me. It's not a classic I'll go back to from particular choice, but I had a good time. It was passable, middling. And as I say, as soon as I went, oh, this is just a bit of a pantomime sort of episode, I enjoyed it. If I was watching it for sort of a deep, cerebral thrills, it would have got a lower mark. But no, I enjoyed it for what it was.
Well, I can watch this with my wife in the room now, and I couldn't before. I would cringe, and for some reason, I did this recently, and you know, and I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. And I'll tell you why.
Ooh.
It's 1, there's some really good special effects we haven't talked about. 2, I think it's got the characters all do something. 3, I don't know, it's got some the tech traps look silly, but they're very imaginative. You've got this other thing where, though, it's losing a couple of points. So I would have almost given it a 7.5 out of 10.
Ooh.
For the odd bit with where there's the bees. There's a really cool idea that the Rani is getting these aliens to work for her.
The second you said bees, I'm getting Nick Cage and the Not the Bees meme in my head. So
the thing is, they have these killer bees that are in a weird ornament that's in the Lacurtians' place where they're being lazy. And in the end, they press the button and the bees come out. But you can't really see them, and they're like little specks of light, and everyone's doing their best to act as if they're there. And I remember thinking, all you needed to do, point of view shot. That would have cost you nothing at all. Have it zooming towards people, or put something over the lens. And it's a strange thing. I think there's a lot of really good ideas in here. And I know Pip and Jane Baker. We forgot to mention the dialogue is absolutely atrocious, but also quite well.
It's absolutely atrocious, and you gave it 7.5 out of 10, Al.
Well, I've taken the
surely
half off.
Knocks a mark off.
Well, this is the thing. I've forgotten how much I love the bad dialogue, but also hate the bad. You know, the whole thing where Sylvester McCoy gets given these malapropisms, they get rid of that really quickly because they're just
they do, don't
really
they? It's almost like, we're trying this with the new Doctor. No, it didn't work. Let's just get rid of it.
So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Yeah,
fair enough.
I nearly went into 6 then. 7. I'm sticking with okay. 6. So now a particular favourite of mine. It's much darker than you think. And imagine if this had been done in the Philip Hitchcock era. It is Towers, set in a weird dystopian rip-off of a much better sort of sci-fi thing, I think, called High Rise.
High Rise,
with,
yeah.
High Rise, with, of course, a very weird or fun or possibly embarrassing performance by Richard Dryers. But everybody is all the way up to 11. But in the good way, do tell me, do you like it?
I adored Paradise Towers. I really did. It's one I saw a few fragments of at the time. On my rewatch last year, Oh no, I loved it. I even loved Richard Bryce. I mean, I loved Richard Bryce anyway, and I loved him chewing the scenery. And the strange thing was, I think he'd escaped from Time in the Rani because he was in panto mode, and the
Yeah.
rest of the cast were kind of actually in a much darker mode. So I think he'd gone into he was from the wrong episode. Enjoyed it. It was the real highlight of the season for me. This one.
I think the only thing that lets it down for me is the fact that the cleaning robots, they look a bit cardboardy, and I think if we'd seen less of them, it would have been scarier. Because I
Yeah.
think the idea is great, and I like the cheesy music. The fact that it feels like it's left over from season 22, because cannibalistic ladies trying to eat Bonnie Langford.
Oh,
And,
yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. It's dark. This is a Colin era story without a doubt. But actually, it works better with Sylvester. I think this is the one where I really saw his Doctor coming to the fore, where he was a figure of light, but actually you could see he fitted into this rather dark, manipulative world far better than the previous Doctor really would have done. I think. I mean, I loved the girl gangs, the Kangs. I mean, it's a bit of its period when you kind of watch it back, but then if you watch Grange Hill or Biker Grove or anything, I think you'd get a very similar level of acting there. So it was BBC authentic teenager from the future, like them. It felt like a real classic Doctor Who story that part of me felt you could have put Tom Baker's Doctor in this, and you'd have had a good time. It would have fitted in sort of mid-late Tom. Quite nicely. I could see Leela being, the companion in this, and yeah, maybe I'm feeling a certain resonance with the Sunmakers. I mean, again, set within an enclosed building with mysterious culture, etc. And I love the Sunmakers. So yeah, okay, Pex.
yeah, well,
He's a bit lame, but.
What I think is interesting about Pex, because I forgot to say how much I like the way that this is shot with lots of shadows and spookiness. We turn the bloody lights down, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
Hasn't got any tie-ins to Time Lords or previous. You don't need to have seen any previous Doctor Who to get any of this, which is rather cool. Pex, I don't think Pex is. People used to say that he was miscast. I like the fact that he isn't this big, huge muscle bloke, a muscle brain. He basically, he got left behind and then he made up a role for himself. And I think that's it's quite sad and interesting. I think what is interesting about it is the fact that when it comes to Paradise Towers, you've got a nice little world building universe going on. You've got actually the Kangs and everything. I think the underwater creature is good. So you don't like Pex then? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not a fan of him as such. I mean, I think if I was to point to any weakness in this, Pex is the weakest character in it. Not even Richard Bryce, the chief caretaker, and when he becomes the great architect. No. I like that. Pex was the one part that I think failed to really convince me, or but I am picking spots here, Al, because I really like this one.
I was worried about them all getting spots because they drink all that lemonade all the time. He opens up the machine, they does the drink. He's brought acne back to this particular place. I mean, another thing.
And diabetes.
Diabetes, yeah. And the other thing I do remember, though, and this will probably bring us back to being teenagers, is watching Doctor Who in a room with a parent, and my parents laughing at the funny bits. So this is before Richard Bryce becomes a zombie, terrible name for a band. When he's got the radio on and he's talking into there like that. Hello, what's going on? I can't. Yeah, that's all this sort of stuff. And it's a bit Peter Cook, and I like it now. And as a kid, I thought, it's a bit cringe. My parents were laughing, and I thought, you mustn't laugh at Doctor Who, but I think it is making that villain vulnerable. He's an idiot. I just think it really works. It's really good. I'm trying to think other things I like about it. I think that it's still slightly of a pantomime thing, but it's shot better. I really feel like
I'm going to say the sets, while limited, are convincing in a way that the OB sort of work we got in Time in the Rani is less convincing to me. This was convincing enough as a cityscape, as a skyscraper super block, and of course, because I'm a long-time Judge Dredd fan, the idea of a single block having this whole culture within it, that appealed to me as well. So, there was probably a little bit of resonance there. But yeah,
So
it's good enjoyable. I think your point was interesting about the lighting. As you say, so much of it shot nicely with shadow. If we just had those robots a bit more in shadow, I think we might have had a true classic.
It is that sort of. I think originally there were rumours that the monster in it were going to be like tentacles or monsters more like that, and then they couldn't afford to do it, so they made these cleaning robots. Which I think the problem is you have that thing where when the cleaning robot arm comes out of the thing and drags the lady in, that's scary. It's like something from a late Hitchcock movie. It looks really scary. But when you see it coming towards you, and people are sort of standing still so it can get to you.
Yeah.
It looks like something from the water sheet, but they had an excuse because that was 1960s.
I mean, we got to remember this is 87, so it's contemporaneous with Red Dwarf. So those cleaning robots weren't as good as the Scutters, and they're the same level of technology. So.
I mean, there is always that thing in Doctor Who, isn't it, where the effects supposedly let it down. And the best sort of Doctor Who thing, like even Caves of Androzani has a big monster, which I thought looked good, but everyone thought looked silly. So we've got Paradise Towers. I think it gets everything right that Time on the Rani gets wrong.
Yeah.
And it's definitely got still some big overacting, which I appreciate. It's not just Richard Bryce. There's a character who's his second in command is absolutely way over the top.
The deputy chief. Oh yeah, he's superb. Brilliant. Yes, Clive Merrison. Yes.
There's a point where he sort of goes like that. So he really there'll be rules about it, wouldn't there? It's like, wow, okay, you can't go any further with that line. So I feel bad because I'm sure I have given better stories lesser marks, but I'm giving this an 8 out of 10.
Do you know? Absolutely agree. 100%. Yeah, 8 out of 10 for me as well. Right.
Okay. So I'm taking a big drink now because we know what we're about to face. Now,
wow, Delta and the Bannermen. Yes.
Here it is. So,
or as I called it for many years, Delta and the Bannerman, because apparently one member of the cast.
Maybe one of them would have been more terrifying. That's what I'm saying.
Don Henderson, dear Don Henderson, he would have been. Yes, he was terrifying on his own, so it was great.
But we have quite a nice idea here, which is
that idea isn't higher Ken Dodd, is it?
No, but he does get killed. Spoilers. So we have a really nice idea. We have a really cool idea here, which is the Doctor and Mel win a prize to go to Disneyland, but they end up in Wales instead. At the same time,
is that foreshadowing for new Doctor Who? The Doctor Who would end up in Wales.
There we are. Who knew? And then basically the bus that they take to go, the space bus, which looks really, really cheap, I'm afraid. It's a nice idea.
It looks like my
has got a baddie in it who wants to get. And then on that bus is a Shimmeran Queen who's being hunted by bounty hunters. So we've got some interesting ideas going on here. And I think, this is not as bad a story as we think that it is. The opening episode, I think, is quite good.
Yes.
I think what happens...
Isn't it just that first episode is some good ideas, some good stuff happening, and then we have 3 episodes at Maplands.
I like Heidi High.
I like Heidi High too, but I'm not sure I want
Maybe
Doctor Who visiting
it. I would have liked.
This is one of those things as well. I know this isn't the overall story; it's just kind of the background. But one of the things that irritates me about this one is the music, the incidental music, where we clearly have no budget to really buy rock and roll songs, and we're just using sort of vague songs that sound like you might have heard on the radio in the 1950s, and it doesn't so much date it as just make it look like it's a school zone production of it. I think that's unfortunate, and I'm aware that obviously the budgetary considerations, but took me out of it, the authenticity of the 50s, because actually the look of it is pretty good for the period. It convinced me. I mean, obviously using a real disused holiday camp helped, and the fact that they hadn't been improved since the 50s and we were recording in the 80s is fine. And, so the cast were good. The cast did a lot with what they had. I loved the Bannermen cycles. I really do. If you'd to ask me the one thing I remember about this, it's them driving around on those pointless quad bikes.
like Day of the Daleks.
Yeah.
Let's say
or Star Drive in Blake 7.
Oh yeah. What lets it down, I'm afraid, and this is the problem for me, is that it and I shouldn't say this because Doctor Who should be made on the cheap and look good, but there's an opening sequence with a battle thing and people shooting at the Shimmeron Queen trying to escape in the desert, and it's a nice idea, but it looks really cheap. And I think the problem is they have these brilliant ideas and really good ambition, but they can't make it happen on the screen. And my instinct would be, if we can't do it, don't do it, do something else. Use the limitations. So when we have some really good characters in here, we have that Welsh lady who shows up, who's in love with the guy who's the engineer. We've got the alien showing up, and she's got a little green animatronic baby that looks quite good, but then turns into a girl in a green leotard. We've got the guy who's the beekeeper, who may be a Time Lord. We've got some really nice ideas.
Or is he Sherlock Holmes? Sherlock Holmes always said he would retire to keep bees.
Oh, so there you go. So I think what is interesting about this is it's let down, and a bit like Rise of Skywalker when the Knights of Ren show up. Then
that's that tremendous moment in that movie.
Yeah, they don't. We've been building up to the Knights of Ren, and they just show up as slightly goth stormtroopers. They don't do anything. Okay, this is the problem with the Bannermen. Is you've got, what's his name, Don Henderson? He's really,
Gavrock.
He's really good. He's over the top. He kills Ken Dodd. I think it's quite dramatic.
Oh yeah,
I think that works quite well.
Yeah, I think in the opening episode, as we've said, is the best episode of this.
Yeah, but then you have the Bannermen who should be scary, and it's not that they aren't. They just don't give them anything scary to do. They don't shoot them in a scary way. They just show up and run around like silly people, and they shouldn't. If you've got a big bad or a collection of big bads, when they show up, everybody should be really scared. I mean, I love I don't know which episode this is, when they all bundle onto a bus, all the little alien people that they meet, and then the bus is destroyed, they die. Oh my goodness. So the stakes are there. This is almost a PG.
Yeah. Again, I think, like Paradise Towers, it works as not being as dark as season 22, but clearly this is a Sylvester era story. I cannot imagine any other Doctor doing this one. For me, when I think of Delta and the Bannermen, I get a Resurrection of the Daleks sort of feel. Resurrection? Not Resurrection. Revelations? Oh, they've all got at the front of them. The one the next season.
Remembrance.
Of course, they're remembering where the Hand of Omega is, aren't they? Yeah, because again, that's a period piece. It's still a similar good sort of feel to it, although that's a far superior story. What about of course, the government spooks who are looking for the satellite? We haven't talked about Hawk and Weissmuller.
Oh dear. I mean, this is the problem. Okay, you got mid-80s, late 80s Doctor Who. And the press and all the fans think the Doctor's got into a pantomime and is just silly. So it's set in Heidi High. You've got Ken Dodd. You've got Bonnie Lankford. You've got a child's entertainer. Now I can get past all these things. And then for some reason, you have these two comedy old guys who just aren't very funny and are just there. And I think it's really like, had they been played by younger actors or were cut out of the whole, I don't like them.
You don't feel they add anything to it, really, do they? And do they subtract from the story as a whole by their screen time? Could we have developed something else in their space with the other characters? You could certainly have had a more compact cast. I mean, you look at the cast for this one; it's a big cast. This probably cost the most money all season. There's a lot of OB work. There's effects work. There's the biggest cast. This is the expensive one, and yet it's not the best one.
It's a strange thing because I like the idea of the story. I can see that we're going into contemporary Doctor Who. We're not on the planet Zog, as Russell T Davies would say, and we're basically just trying to bring it all down to earth. And I think this is a lovely idea. I just think it looks cheap. I don't mind the cheap rock and roll in it. I think it's got some really good characters in it. But when I set myself down to watch it, I'm like, what a cracking first episode. And then it gets cheaper and cheaper, and it loses. It's got some charm. I can understand DJ Hooper, my friend, is watching this. I can understand why he would really like it, because I like the original music with the Here's to the Future music. It's quite good, but that's.
I mean, I have heard that many times. I've got a recording of it, but it still feels cheap though.
I think the problem is, and we've just with I'm not quite sure what Delta the Bannerman is trying to be. If it was a spoof or a pastiche, then just ramp it up. If it's not, then you can't have. Is it a B movie?
I have a horrible feeling Delta and the Bannermen is Star Wars: A New Hope on a Doctor Who budget. Think about it. The Queen fleeing from her enemies, pursued by a dark and mysterious character. Oh my lord, the CIA guys are R2 and 3PO. That's why they're there. They're the comic relief. If you look at it through that lens, Ray I think's Han Solo.
She's great. I forgot to say I like her a lot.
She's good. She's good. And her boyfriend's Luke Skywalker, which way doesn't have much to do, but he's technically the hero of the piece, maybe to regenerate the race. Ken Dodd does that make Ken Dodd Obi-Wan Kenobi? I sort of think, but you could take the illusion too far, but the elements are there. And they don't fall together. So it's Star Wars through the lens of Doctor Who in a Welchology camp in the 1950s. It's a bit of a mess when you put it all together. There's too much there.
Yeah.
There's too much, too cheap. The ambition here might have outstretched their ability.
It's a tricky thing because I always go in thinking, I'm going to like this, because a lot of people say it's overrated or underrated or whatever it is. And I'm sometimes, as I say, I'm about an episode and a half in and going, how is this rated at all? You've slightly lost my interest. I think, again, there's no ticking clock, and it's a mixture of different things, because you've got Ken Dodd is actually quite good in it.
Yes, he's surprisingly so.
Yeah. Avrock is going really over the top. I'm right. I'm gonna have to give it some sort of score here, and I'm gonna give it like a 4.5 or a 5. Sorry,
wow.
CJ.
Wow, I give it a 6 because it's a bit of a mess, but it's of its period, Grantor. So I enjoyed it. The first episode really lifts it up, and yes, the next 3 episodes drag it down, but I like they were trying something different. They were trying something expansive. I mean, all the reasons I've said why it's not a great episode, but it's not a 5. It's definitely a 6 for me. So
I think as I go in thinking it's going to be a 6, and I watch it and I slightly lose the will to live.
That's the Bonnie Langford effect.
Well, again, she's all right in there. I mean, I feel like I'm changing my mind about my review here, but every time I watch it.
When I watched it again last year,
yeah,
I definitely had that kind of Mandela syndrome, Mandela effect, because I thought this was Ace was the companion in this one.
Wow, now that would have been interesting.
And I went, it's Mel. So my memory had clearly misremembered that aspect. So Mel didn't really strike me doing a great deal of this one. Not compared to Paradise Towers, which had lots to do. So
I know hair is normal everywhere. They could have used it as a treatment, to be honest. There's this enormous. It was good to see you in Doctor Who again. And she's going to be. I think Mel is coming back in the next season. I've seen her.
I know. I mean, I know that's kind of a slightly off topic, but yeah, with Mel coming back in the specials at the end of last year, I experienced a new experience, and that was being glad to see Bonnie Langford and Mel coming back, because I really enjoyed her in it.
Very quickly, she's very good.
Mel on a rewatch is far more enjoyable than Mel when I saw her at the time.
Okay, well, she's quite funny in Bugsy Malone. She takes the mickey out of herself in that, and I think she's really good. Have you seen Bugsy Malone? She shows up as a sort of a diva showing off, and I think it's very funny that she because people assume that of her. But anyway, so I gave it a 5. You gave it a 6.
6.
Now, so here we go. Now, this is the last episode of season 24, and it's Dragonfire. What do you think?
You know what I'm going to mention straight away, don't you? The episode 1 cliffhanger. Episode 1 cliffhanger.
Yeah.
The literal cliffhanger.
It's an odd moment, isn't it? You've got this thing. It's set in it's not set in a freezer center, though. To be honest, they do say, "Oh, we're on this frozen planet," and straight away they walk into Bijan or Iceland. Other places are available, but the villain is great in it. The monster looks good when you can't see it so much. The little girl is really irritating. Ace, I think, is brilliant. It's great to see Tony Selby again.
Oh, it's Glitz.
But as you say, Glitz, the cliffhanger. No, it's not a good cliffhanger.
And again, it's one of those things that on paper, and they were clearly going for something else, but how we realised it, the Doctor walks down the corridor. The Doctor decides to hang himself off a cliff. The Doctor gets back up the next episode. He's fine. It is the weakest of cliffhangers. Well, ever since Sarah Jane fell down that slight hill in the Five Doctors.
Well, I mean, I would say the interesting thing about Dragonfire is, again, it's got this thing. It's got ambition. It's got quite a good villain, again. And the lady from I've forgotten her name now. Belaz is really good. Is that right? His second in command.
Patricia Quinn, yes, Belaz. Yeah.
She's really good in this. She's from Rocky Horror and Shock Treatment, which I really like. And they've got a lot going on. Again, we've got some really clunky dialogue. Turn the lights down. Again, we could have some creepiness.
It's difficult. You're on Ice World. Ice World is by definition bright and white. It's got it. I mean, it is very clearly a studio set. Even with the willing suspension of disbelief, I was very unconvinced by it. I really was. The set, I felt as a whole, again, the cheapness of the era was coming through here. I didn't resonate as much with the story. I watched it last year, and I was kind of just reminding myself earlier on today about it. I was going, I don't remember so much of this one. It really didn't grab me, other than Glitz and Ace. Which, Ace, I mean, I love Ace, one of my favourite companions, so that, great introduction. And Glitz, I think, a character would have loved to have seen more of, really.
Well, I was very surprised. I mean, I've got a friend of mine, Mark Keegan, that's his uncle. And I met Tony Selby a few times in a pub, and he was quite fun, quite drunk, and sometimes quite grumpy about the industry and stuff. And I was very
like many actors, I think you'll find.
Yeah, well, I was very surprised he wasn't brought back in the Russell T Davies era. I'm very surprised he wasn't put in the Big Finish this. I don't think there is any Big Finish with him in, because it's a really good, popular character. Yeah. And originally, it wasn't going to be him. Originally, I think it was a character called Razorback. I could be wrong, but it wasn't going. And then suddenly they went, actually, you know who we should get? Let's bring that character back. I think what is interesting about Dragonfire is the fact that the villain really holds it in place. He's really spooky. He does this, and people with steam come out of people. This is really horrific. But then the thing I met
he is, yeah. I mean, there's no denying that it's a powerful performance as Kane. He is a villain with a capital V. There's none of this. I'm just a bounty hunting down a dragon queen, as the previous one. This guy is, for all intents and purposes, he's not. He's kind of the Nazi-esque like uniforms we've got, possibly borrowed from The Empire Strikes Back, I suspect. But well, looks at them.
Well, there was that thing that's slightly spoiled it for me, which is you had these really intense moments of take the coin, girl, get burnt on the hand, become a slave. Oh my goodness! And then you have a bit where they're trying to do a bit of Alien, or Aliens with the giant guns, but and they're trying to make out that this monster is really scary. And then a little girl comes along and sort of is a little cute with it. And it completely deflates the whole Alien big, spooky and scary. And I don't understand why that is there. I don't understand why we have this little girl. It embarrassed me when I was 15 or so watching it, that there was a really cool episode and the baddie's going to kill Ace. But let's cut back to this little girl running around and putting her teddy in a box. And it really, rewatching it now, I'm still unsure why those scenes are there. It's just padding. It's not. It doesn't relate to the story. It's not funny. It's not creepy. Like it would have been creepy, say if the girl was part of Kane's nastiness, or it would have been creepy if we thought the girl was going to be accidentally locked in the ice bin. She still, years later, I'm not comfortable with this whimsy, and I normally like whimsy stuff. Yeah, not for me.
But we must remember, it's no Time Flight or Time Lash.
Both of which I enjoy for different reasons.
No.
Oh yes.
Oh, I mean, obviously Time Lash. We've got Paul Darrow to enjoy, but that's yeah.
And also we've had lots of different cool special effects other than the cleaners, and also stuff in Delta and Barnum. Okay, we've had 2 really good special effects in this season. Some of the rocket stuff that you see in this episode, this planet, and the face melting bit is really good.
Nice.
And unexpected. Though if you read Doctor Who magazine, or I did in 1987, they had a strip called Cold Day in Hell, which involves people being an ice planet and ice warriors, which has the line, "Oh, cold feet," but also has a baddie at the end. Screen comes up, melted. This is such a weird coincidence. At the same time as the TV going out, the comic strip's doing exactly the same thing. Great minds think alike, or idiots seldom differ. I don't know.
Or lack of coordination between the show and the magazine, probably totally separate entities.
Anyway, you've done what I've done. I mean, imagine if this had the Ice Warriors in it. I mean, imagine if the season had ended with a surprise villain appearing.
That if the dragon of the piece was, some frozen ice warriors who'd be coming at you, that would have really taken this up a notch, I think, because then you'd had a villain and another villain, but actually the Ice Warriors would probably be the more sympathetic ones at this point, and that would be a nice change of direction for them. But then, as we know, it's the next season that's the looking back season of trying to reflect on things that have happened before over the last 25 years.
So this is tricky because from our rambling and nattering about Dragonfire, it's difficult to tell. If people are intrigued, as I watch this, what views out of 10 are we going to give it?
Yeah, I really agonised over this, El, because as I say, there's some good elements, there's some good character work in it. That's its real strength. Blitz, Kane, Ace, even Mel and the Doctor. Story-wise, just no. Set-wise, no. I'm going to give it 5 out of 10 because I probably enjoyed it marginally more than Time in the Rani. I decided. I think it looked more accomplished, but I didn't love it.
I'm giving it like a 6.5 out of 10 because the character of the baddie and the character of Ace managed to make me lift past the cliffhanger and some of the kooky childlike bits. And I normally like childlike stuff. It's almost as if you try and imagine that this story was done by Philip Hinchcliffe and Christopher Lee was the baddie, and I know Leela was there, or Tom Bates. I think this has got again.
I can see exactly what you mean about that. I mean, there's almost a sort of invasion of time, or the invisible enemy, or robots of death period feel to the piece, but brought up into cheap video, sharp late 80s. It doesn't look so good as a result.
You always
lower quality cameras would have done this a big favour.
There you go. As in the sort of fuzziness of film would have hidden.
Yeah,
the fact
I think it would. I think it really would have. The sharpness of video camera and videotape for the period didn't lend this any favours in terms of sort of cinema verite, in terms of the realism and the feel. It is very clearly could be just a bloke filming this in the room next to me. I'm not convinced it's an alien world, an alien spacecraft.
I think the interesting thing about this particular season is they had these really cool, ambitious ideas, which has always been ambitious on a small budget. But what they sort of failed to realise, and I think they got too meta the previous season with having the trial of the Time Lord because the show might not have been coming back. With this particular one, they're like, this is all new, this is all new, exciting. And I think they've got some really good ideas. I think probably the production was rushed. I think they just had to get the stuff out there. But as we've discovered, other than, I think, Delta and the Barnum episodes 2 and 3, we are enjoying or enduring when it comes to Time in the Rani, watching this. But with 3 or 4 million people tuning in 1987, I think you and I were possibly the only people watching it.
It did feel like that at times, yeah. But then, as I say, this was the season I'd watched the least. at the time. Now, contrast that with season 25, which I know we're not talking about today. Far fewer clunkers. Similar sort of feel, you could argue, to many of the stories and the situations and everything, but it just worked better. But that's because Sylvester had really bedded into the role by then.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing with new Doctors. I think you've got this whole thing where the show hinges on the lead character, the enigma, the unique person who is playing the Doctor at this point. If you put a children's entertainer next to another children's entertainer with a cheap budget and half-written scripts and a show that doesn't quite know what it wants to be, people like me and you, well, you weren't watching, but I kept watching, going, because I like quirky, weird sci-fi and stuff. And I think they took some risks here, a bit like the first season of Jodie, as you mentioned. So I'm going to give
which as we found, I don't think was as bad as I'd certainly remember. It was actually more enjoyable. So
I'm going to give this season. Oh my goodness! I think ironically, it's all been 6.5 out of 10. So I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10 because, it's not a 10 out of 10 stuff, but equally it isn't 4 out of 10. It's not the worst season of Doctor Who, but I do enjoy it, knowing it's a bit silly.
Do you know, it's interesting. What would we say was the worst season of Doctor Who? Yeah, for me, it's a 6 out of 10. I mean, I think that is it. Certainly, Paradise Towers, head and shoulders above the rest of the season. But unfortunately, I think 3 middling episodes fortunately drags the season score down as a whole.
So that is season 24, and I was going to say, really, I think as when it comes to season 24 and 25, 26, which are better, I think the damage had already been done, and people just thought Doctor Who was a bit silly, and it's a shame because by season 26, at some point, which we might review, they are doing some crazy, dark, weird ideas. McCoy should have gone straight in with the crazy, dark stuff, but
Yeah, imagine that. Imagine a season 24 that was Battlefield, Ghostlight, Fenric, and Survival.
Yeah,
that would be a very different statement of this isn't your father's Doctor Who anymore. We're going down there, but it kind of took it to the tail end when, like I say, you and I were watching and nobody else. It felt like.
So, with people watching now, what are we doing next? Do we know what we're doing next?
I don't think we've agreed yet. It's gonna. Well, maybe our viewers will have some comments about what we should review next.
Okay, so do write down there, and thank you very much, Mr. Gaz.
Absolute pleasure. See you next time, Al.